see that as our mission. And well, we start by listening to people. Every single research project that we do has got at its core proper sociological research with individuals and communities in the UK. It might be standard polling or in-depth interviews or even ethnographic research over a period of time. And so we try not to be polemic or ideological. We come from a sort of soft, centrist, sort of social liberal standpoint, but that can work across all three parties. And we want to hear what people are saying, observe how they live their lives, and then extrapolate very hard-hitting policy recommendations and blast them literally at central government, normally, sometimes local government. And so we feel in that way that we're giving people a voice, we're empowering communities and individuals. The clue's in the name, demos, people. The more granular you get, the more interested we are. And a lot of our work has been about giving citizens effective voices. But because we like to start with people, even the most grassroots institutions are not immune from scrutiny. So I wouldn't say, I like a parish council because it's smaller than a metropolitan council. But the closer that any institution is to what people are feeling and saying and what they want to do, the more effective we feel it is. So, over the last few years, we've done a lot of work, in particular, on enabling communities to articulate what they want, and there are implications for all tiers of local government for that. Where you have a very effective parish council is performing a fantastic role. Where you don't, then you've got a missed opportunity. We think it's the beginning of a different way of thinking about how public services can be run. We're a critical friend. We don't necessarily think it's going to work in every aspect, and in particular where it simply rejuggles, what's the phrase, shifts the chairs around of the institutions rather than really focusing on empowering the individual. Then we might look a bit more askance at it. But in general, if people are unable to articulate their views and act on them, then that is a problem. And insofar as the localism agenda seeks to address that, that's very exciting. We've done work, for example, suggesting that any micro part of the country, be it an estate, a village, a town, should be able to have its own what we call micro-mayor, that might not necessarily be part of the institutional democratic framework, but is able to informally speak for an area, get things done, and by having that tag attached to them, exercise leadership. And so we're very much in favour of communities coming together and taking power into their own hands, which is what the government's localism agenda is also trying to achieve. No, I don't. I don't see a tension there at all.
Why do you not see?
Why? Because it depends what the community is trying to achieve, but it may well be that by empowering them to take matters into their own hands within a legislative framework, that it generates more economic activity. I mean, normally when a community decides to come together, it's because there's a tension in the system. Something as simple as wanting to get the zebra crossing, or wanting to take over this, or wanting to provide the service for themselves. And so, if you enable that to happen, you've got more activity going on. Empowerment very rarely leads to less activity. We're delighted that the government has taken up the Demos idea of pooled budgets and co-production. This is something we've been working on for a while, and obviously others have as well. We think it can be really exciting, and the whole idea of using market mechanisms to empower normal, ordinary individuals and communities is something that we think has huge potential. And the government is definitely moving in that direction. I mean, when you look at the sort of ideas of personal budgets and pupil premia, it's about creating market incentives to achieve social outcomes. And this applies just as well to co-production and giving communities budgets. And we think it's really exciting. There's no point having a top-down statist approach to achieving outcomes if actually it is more effective to give power and resources where it actually wants to sit. If they can achieve what they want to achieve, it's potentially transformatory. But we always need to look at it through the prism of what does this mean for the least empowered community, what does it mean for individuals that don't have sharp elbows, and focus a huge amount on providing capacity and resources to geographic areas that can't really articulate a view for whatever reason. But the idea of giving opportunity and power and contestability to groups that do passionately care is very exciting. And it comes back to what I said before, that where there's grassroots tension over the provision of a public service, then that can often be resolved by sort of internalising the problem, by giving the power to the people who are grumpy. And there's a very sort of simple example that I think articulates the point. I mean, if you've got, and you see this classically up and down the country, if you've got a council that's in charge of a park, and there's a Friends of the Park group, they don't normally, often, devote much of their energy to complaining to the council that something isn't done. So, please invest more in the please invest more in the children's playground. Why don't we have park rangers? You need a proper sign. Can't we open a cafe? And if you instead say, okay, do it, you've got the power, then all that negative energy actually is immediately focused on improving outcomes. And so you need the kind of conclusion you draw from that is everywhere where there's that type of tension, it just goes without saying that you need to give the power to the people who are grumpy, because they will channel their energies effectively. The question for the government over the Open Public Services White Paper is, what do you do where there's nobody shouting because they don't have the capacity to shout? And that's the kind of next stage of reform. I think it begins to. It talks about how people are being trained up to work in less capable communities, and it talks about providing information and giving a right to contest and so on. And I think it's something the government has quite seriously considered, but we'll need to watch and see what happens in practice. I'd have thought there's scope for more work there. And we're just refreshing our research plans for the end of this year and into 2012, and the enormous potential from the kind of gates that have been opened from this white paper is making us very excited, and there's a sort of myriad of avenues you can explore, in particular about how you transfer power by transferring resources. It would certainly be ridiculous for them not to have those powers if they want to take them, but I don't think that necessarily means that it has to be a town or parish council that is the right vehicle. But if a parish council wanted to, I think it's very exciting that it should be able to, because again, it turns latent energy into positive outcome. I think it's always good when people come together to take responsibility for geographic-based services. And if they want to form a parish council, and that's possible, that's great. But similarly, it's great if they want to form a neighbourhood watch, or they want to form a Save Our Services campaign that then runs it, or a community interest company that takes over a youth club, or a tenants and residents association, or a campaign for this or that. All of it's good. Well, presumably the commissioning authority will be a democratic authority, so ultimately they can be voted out. My understanding the government has thought about this and has got some kind of sort of arbitrating quite type authority that if you feel you're being blocked unreasonably, you can have it looked into to try and break down unreasonable barriers. But ultimately you don't want an inferior organisation taking over control of the service, and there has to be a way of judging quality somewhere in the system, otherwise it gets a bit ideological. the answer to that, I would say, is that this is an opportunity for a good candidate. In a sense, the field is wide open.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity for somebody who really feels that they can transform their neighbourhood to go out and convince people and get elected. This is not something that's stitched up or, even hugely competitive.
Yeah.
Kind of personal views, you may want to look at the number of councillors in some areas, perhaps make it a bit more competitive, a bit more professional.
Mm.
But other people don't like professionalising politicians. So, there's a kind of local mood for this. I think it's always good when they listen. I think don't presume you're always right. There's the way the agenda is going is that good ideas should be given validity and empowered. Don't presume that you know everything about your community.